Webflow makes it easy to design for every screen. Now let's build daily interaction number 15. Hey, what's up everyone? John with WebDev for you, and welcome to the Daily Interaction series, where every weekday we build a new interaction or animation in Webflow. Today we're going to create a menu item animation on hover. So here when I hover over these menu items, we have this little dot appearing. And it's a subtle effect, but it can be a bit more interesting than just having either an underline appear or having nothing appear. We can have this nice little dot as we hover over the menu item. And this was actually inspired by this website here, secondcityworks.com, where you hover and they have this little dot appearing. So it'll be pretty straightforward. First, we're going to create all the elements, and then we're going to add the interaction. We're also going to play with children and sibling classes because there's a couple of ways we can create this interaction. So this is what we will be building today. To view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Also, be sure to subscribe below to receive a notification every time there's a new daily interaction. Okay, so here I have a blank Webflow project, and we'll start with the daily interaction class naming convention. So it's the daily interaction number, so today is 15, and then the element. So every element on the site will have a d-15 in front of it, and this is for consistency purposes and so that we know we're working with daily interaction number 15. So the next thing I'll do is I'll add a section. So I'll add an element, I'll select section, and I'll give it the class name d-15 section. And for this, I'll give it a height of 100 VH, so it spans the full height of the viewport, and it will be the full width as well. And then I'll scroll down and I'll give it a background color of black. So here in the background, I'll select black, and there we go. And then for the display setting, I'll scroll up here, select display setting, set it to flex, set it to horizontal, justify center, and align center. So anything I place within this section will be in the center. So the next thing I want to do is add a menu wrapper so that later I can move this menu anywhere I want on the site. So here I'll add an element, I'll add a div block, and I'll give it the class name d-15 menu wrapper. And for this, I'll give it a display setting of flex and justify center and align center. So all the menu items will be in the center. All right, then the next thing I want to do here is add a menu item wrapper. So here I'll add an element, I'll add a div block, and I'll call this d-15 menu item wrapper. So the reason I'm adding a wrapper to the menu item is because we're going to work with either the children class or the sibling class, and this will make a bit more sense in a second. So there I have the menu item wrapper, and for this I also want to set a display setting of flex, and I'm going to do vertical, justify center, and align center, because I'm going to have the menu text and the dot within this menu item wrapper. All right, so looks good. So the next thing we'll do is add the text for the menu item. So I'll add an element. Actually, no, we need to add the link block. So I'll add the element, I'll add a link block because we want to link out this menu item to either a URL, a page section, email, phone number, or a file. So there we have the link block, so I'll name it d-15 link block. So now I'll add the text to this link block. So I'll add an element, I'll add a text block, so right up here I'll select text, and I'll give it the class name d-15 menu item text. So I know it seems like we're adding a lot of divs within divs. This will become a bit more clear when we add the interaction. I just want to show two methods of creating this, so that's the reason we're adding a few divs inside of other divs. Okay, so there I have the menu item text, and we notice it has this funky blue color. and that's because it's inside of a link block. So let's look at the navigator. This will probably help us kind of make sense of all the divs we just added. So we have the menu wrapper, and inside the menu wrapper, we have the menu item wrapper, then we have the link block, and we have the text inside of the link block. So I'm going to select the link block, go into styles, and here for the typography, under typography, I'm going to set it to none, so we don't have that underline. Then I can select the menu item text, and I'll style it a bit. So I'll give it a font of circular bold, set the font weight to bold, give it the color of white, and I'll double click in here and just rename it to home, and then I'll change the font size as well. So I'll say something like, let's do 34, and the line height will say 40. Okay, so there we have the menu item text. So now I want to add the circle. So if I go to the example, when we hover over these menu items, the circle appears. So the reason I decided to add the different divs is because we can either have it that the circle appears when we hover over the link block, and we can also have the circle appear when we hover underneath. So I want to show both methods. If you have any questions as I'm going through this, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, because we are working with a few divs here. Okay, so we have the menu item text. So I'm going to add the circle to the menu item wrapper and not the link block. All right, and then we're going to affect the sibling. Okay, so this is where it's going to make sense. All right, so we have the menu item wrapper. So here I'm going to add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and notice the div block goes underneath, and that's because the menu item wrapper has a flex setting of vertical and center. So it goes underneath it because it's stacked. All right, so here we go. All right, so we have the div block, and I'll give it a class name of d-15 circle. So this is going to be that little circle. And for this, I'll set it to a width and height of, let's say 10 pixels by 10 pixels, maybe a little bit larger, 15 by 15. And we'll give it a background color of white. And for the border radius, we'll say 50%. So to add to make it a perfect circle, it only needs to be half the size of the square. So you can set it to 50%, or you could set it to half the size in pixels. But if it was half of 15, it would be 7.5 pixels. So I just do 50%, makes it a bit easier. All right, so there we have the circle. So the interaction trigger is going to be the link block, right? So when we hover over the link block, I want to affect the circle, and the circle is a sibling of the link block because they're both inside the menu item wrapper. Okay, so yeah, just wanted to explain that really quick. The more times I iterate this, I think the easier it will be to kind of make sense of it. So if I repeat myself a few times, it's only because I want it to be as clear as possible. Okay, so we have the menu item wrapper, we have the circle, so we have the elements we need. So what I'm going to do is copy the menu item wrapper and paste it 4 more times. So we have 5 menu items. So here I'll select menu item wrapper, I'll hit Command C to copy, and then paste till I have 5 menu items. And notice they all stack horizontally, or yeah, they're placed horizontally, and that's because the menu wrapper has a flex setting of horizontal, justify center, and align center. Okay, so for the menu item wrapper, the first thing I'll do here is select it, and I'll add some left and right margins. So I'll hold down Alt, and I'll add 10 pixels to each side. By holding down Alt, you can affect the left and right side at the same time. So here I'll just rename the text home, about, services, contact, and shop. Let me double click, shop. Okay, so we have all our menu items. They all have the same classes and everything like that. So if we go in the navigator, I'll click collapse all and then open it up here. So we have 5 different menu items. So now we can create the interaction, and the interaction is actually fairly simple. We're just going to scale this circle from 0 to 1 every time the user hovers over the link block. So here for the first menu item wrapper, I'm going to select the link block, which is right here. I'm going to go into interactions. Here next to element trigger, I'm going to click the plus sign, and I'm going to select mouse hover. So the interaction is going to occur when we hover over an element. So here I'll select mouse hover. On hover, we're going to start an animation, and we're going to add a new timed animation. So I'll click the plus, and I'll call this D-15 mouse in. And for this, what I want to affect is the circle. So I'll select the circle here. I'll go back into interactions, and I'm going to add a new timed action of scale. So scale changes the size of the element. So I want the initial scale of the circle to be 0 so we don't initially see it. So here I have it selected, and right down here for the scale, we do want to affect the X and Y at the same time. So here the lock is locked, so it's constrained for the X and the Y. So if I change the X, the Y will change as well. So here I'll set it to an X and Y of 0 so we don't see the circle. And then I'll set it here next to timing. I'll set it as the initial state, so we don't initially see that circle. And then I want it to scale to 1, which is the original size of the circle. So I'll add another timed action. I'll say scale, and I'll set it to 1 so we can see the circle. And I'll add an easing of ease out expo. Just a personal preference. You can set the easing to anything you'd like. The duration of 0.5 is okay. And that's it. So if I preview and I hover, we can see that dot comes in. The other ones are not coming in yet, so we're gonna change that in a second. So the next thing we need to do, let's actually affect all the menu items, not just the first one. So the reason we're only affecting the first one is because right here where it says affect, we're just affecting the selected element. So this is where we're going to work with sibling classes. So if I open this up here, we can affect a class. So action will affect multiple elements with the same class. So if I select this, any element that has D-15 circle will be affected. So if I preview and I hover, they all come in at the same time. That's not exactly what I want. I want to affect only the sibling class, right? So if we go into the navigator, the circle is a sibling of the interaction trigger because they have the same parent, which is menu item wrapper. So the circle isn't inside of the link block. If it was inside of it, it would be a child, but because it's not inside, it's a sibling. So if we go into the interaction trigger, so sibling, you can think of they have the same parent, right, which is menu item wrapper. So if I go into the interaction, we have the subcategory, so we can affect only children with this class and only siblings with this class. So I want to affect only siblings, so action will affect only the sibling elements of the interaction trigger. So if I select this here and I preview, we notice only the first one works. So that's because only the first one, and let me go back in here, only the first one is an interaction trigger because we can see that because it has the green circle with the lightning bolt. So if I go back into interactions, I can close this here, and right here for trigger settings, rather than triggering just an element, which is this first one, we can trigger a class. So we can trigger on all elements with the same class, D-15 link block. So if I go into the navigator, so we'll select class here. I'll go into the navigator, and if I open each menu item wrapper, we can see that each is an interaction trigger because they have the lightning bolt. If I were to just select element and I go into the navigator, only the one I selected has the interaction trigger. So we want to go into interactions and make sure for trigger settings it's set to class, so any element that has the D-15 link block becomes an interaction trigger. All right, so the first one, so all of them become an interaction trigger, and we're going to affect the circle inside, or the circle, which is a sibling of the interaction trigger. Okay, so now if I preview, we're affecting each one at a time. So just like that, we're affecting the sibling, and it looks good. So the next thing we need to do is add a hover out animation. So here I'm going to start an animation, and I'm going to duplicate the mouse in. So I'll click on these three dots, select duplicate. I'll click on D-15 mouse in 2. And here we only need one timed action, which is bringing the circle back to a scale of 0. So I'm going to delete this first timed action, which is an initial state. We don't need it to be an initial state because we set that for the first, for the mouse in. So I'll just select it, select delete, and now we have the timed action here. So right down here where it says scale, rather than setting it to 1, I'll just enter in 0. So it goes to a scale of 0 when we hover off the link block. And we're affecting the class and only siblings with this class. It has an easing of ease out expo, which is what we want because, because it was duplicated from the first one, and the duration is 0.5. So now if I preview, I hover, there we go. So if I hover over each one, we have that dot appearing on each one. Great. So notice if I hover underneath, it doesn't occur. Only if I hover over the text, which is inside the link block. So that looks good. So now we can cover working with children classes, and this is a great example to demonstrate this. This is a good interaction to demonstrate this with. So let's go back into the navigator and let's open up the link block. So rather than having the circle belong to the menu item wrapper, we're going to place the circle inside of the link block. So I can just click, hold, and drag to the right to place it inside of the link block. And notice the position changed. So we want to select the link block, go into styles, give it a display setting of flex, set it to vertical, and here I can say justify center and align center. All right, so we just needed to add the flex setting to the link block because we placed the circle inside of it. So now the circle is inside of the link block. So let's do that for each link block. All right, so now the circle is a child of the link block because it is inside of it. All right, so if we preview, we notice nothing works. And that's because in the interaction, we're affecting a sibling. We're affecting a sibling class, but now there isn't any sibling class because the circle used to be a sibling and now it's a child. So now we'll select the link block, go back into the interaction, and I'll select D-15 mouse in, select it here. I'll select the circle, and right here where it says only siblings with this class, we want to affect only children with this class because now the circle, the D-15 circle element, is a child of the interaction trigger, which is the link block. So I'll select it here, and notice they all disappeared, which is good. So if I hover over, perfect. So now we just need to do the same for the hover out. So I'll go back in, select D-15, and I'll actually rename this to D-15 mouse out. Select the timed action, and here where it says only siblings with this class, I'll say only children with this class, so the action will affect only the elements inside the interaction trigger. So I'll select it here, and if I preview, we have the interaction. So because the link block or the circle is inside the link block, if I hover underneath the text, we can see the circle. And a good way to demonstrate this is if I add like a border to the link block. So I'll select it and I'll add a border here. I'll add a border and I'll set it to white. So we can see the link block. So if we hover anywhere inside of the link block, the circle appears. Before, when it was a sibling, so if I, just as an example, if I made it remove the circle and it was a sibling, we notice that the circle is outside of the link block, and the link block is the interaction trigger. So if we hover underneath it, we wouldn't see the circle, only if we hovered over the text. All right, so just wanted to demonstrate that, and I'll place this back inside so we can have the interaction occur. So I can hover anywhere inside of this border, which is the link block, and we'll see the circle. All right, looks good. So yeah, let me remove that that border. I'll just here say X, And that's it. So hopefully that was all clear. I thought this was a good way to showcase sibling and children classes. A child, a child class is inside of the interaction trigger. So whatever the interaction trigger is, if it's inside of it, it's a child. And if it's not inside of it, and they're both inside of another div, then it's a sibling. All right, so yeah, I think I went over it enough. And a good reference is to know, a good thing that's helpful is to know what the interaction trigger is. So if you're not sure what the interaction trigger is, even though you've selected it maybe at the beginning, is to go into the navigator, and if it has a green circle with a lightning bolt symbol, that is the interaction trigger. So the sibling or the child element will be relative to the interaction trigger. Or you can decide which one it is, relative to, the interaction trigger. Okay, so I think I've covered it enough. Now I'll just demonstrate why I decided to place it in a menu wrapper. So now we have the menu wrapper, so I can select it here in the navigator, and I can give it a position of absolute. And now I can place it in the upper right, upper left, bottom right. I can set the bottom or the top, and things like that. So by placing it in a wrapper, in a wrapper, we can give it a position of absolute and place it anywhere we'd like on the site. So now I can select the text. I can resize it to make it a bit smaller, something like that. And I'll make the dot a bit smaller so it's not so big. So I'll say like 10 by 10. And then I'll give the menu wrapper, some top and bottom margin. So I'll say 20, and I'll do something like 40 here. Okay, so now I'll preview, and there we have our menu. Looks good. And I would probably, for the text, let's see, I probably wouldn't make it bold here, maybe book and something like this. So it's a bit thinner, or either way, bold works too. But yeah, that is creating a menu item animation on hover. If you have any questions about anything I went over, please feel free to let me know in the forum section or in the comment section of this video. All right, I think it's a good thing to grasp, the whole sibling and child element classes, because once you get a good handle on that, creating interactions does become easier. All right, looks good. Yeah, so that's it for daily interaction number 15. The menu item animation on hover. It was inspired by Second City Works. This is a really cool website. It has some other cool animations to it as well. I highly recommend checking it out. All right, looks good. Yep, so that's it for this video tutorial. To view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next daily interaction.